Hello. I make no apology for this next video. It is on education. People sometimes say to me, why do you do so many videos on education? Well, there's two main reasons. One, it directly affects me, which I guess is a bit selfish. But the other one is I think it's the cornerstone of society. I think if we can't treat the most vulnerable in society that can't advocate for themselves with basic respect, what hope do we have as a society moving forwards? I would also apply that to the pensioners and the care homes and hospices. There's groups in society who are basically sitting ducks waiting to be shot by the government. And in education, it's happening day after day after day. And in our recent one, we've got Bridget Phillipson tweeting, "This government will continue our decisive support for Ukrainian children who have had their education interrupted by Russia's war. That's why this week I asked exam boards to consider introducing a Ukrainian GCSE." Now, on the first part, she's right. I totally agree. I think that we should be supporting Ukrainian children in their education in this country. I cannot see why we wouldn't. They are refugees of a war-torn country. They are coming here for safety and security, and their education should carry on. I completely agree with that. As for the Ukrainian GCSE, I, again, don't necessarily disagree with that. But what does rankle is that we are cutting GCSEs for our own children in the UK because of lack of funding. So I feel like we need to have a bit more transparency on that. I feel like there needs to be a few more answers and a few more explanations as to how we're going to do that. But in principle, do I agree with it? Absolutely I do. Because I don't agree with the disruption of any child's education. So this is my sticking point. Whilst Bridget Phillipson is telling us that we should be supporting Ukrainian education, and I agree with her, she is also disrupting the education of tens of thousands of children in this country. And she's accusing the parents of those children of all manner of underhand tactics in politicising, publicising why VAT on education wouldn't work. She is belittling and accusing them of lying with all the facts and figures that say this won't stack up. But now the facts and figures are out. So what's she going to say now we've got the actual figures? So let's remind ourselves, Bridget Phillipson said she thought about 3,000 children might leave in the first year. To date, from a new report from the ISC, to date, we've got 13,000. Now, we know the government were told the real figures that were projected were 54,000 over 2 years. We know the government chose not to share that with you and I, and we know the government were told that that would mean it would raise net zero. We also know the government were told that the most disruptive time to implement VAT on education would be in January. They were told it would be less disruptive in April and less disruptive in August, but the government ignored that and they went for the most disruptive time. They actively disrupted children's education. Yet Bridget Phillipson claims her principle is to support children who have had their education interrupted. Now here she cites by Russian war. So one assumes that there are levels of what's acceptable for having your education disrupted. And by your own government, that's not one that we really care about. That's okay. You're allowed to have your education disrupted. Now, this links to Keir Starmer's own education, which was disrupted. So his school went from being a grammar school to a private school. And when that happened, Surrey County Council said, well, we will continue to pay for the children that are already in the school and we will get them through their education. And then anyone joining now, it is an independent school. So Keir Starmer's education was protected, which I agree with. For the record, I think it's the right thing to do. Keir Starmer didn't ask for it to go from being a grammar school to an independent school. His parents did have a choice. If they were politically motivated, if they politically didn't agree with the independent sector, then yes, they had a choice to take him out. They chose not to. They chose that they did agree with that, so they kept him there and his fees were paid for by Surrey County Council. We also know that in the run-up to the general election, Keir Starmer didn't want his own son's revision being interrupted by the press circus that was surrounding him, he says, at the time. So he says it was necessary for him to borrow Lord Ali's flat where his son could revise. We hear lots of other rumours and allegations about why he had that flat. I'm not here to comment on them, but what I will say is Keir Starmer said he made no apology for putting his boy first. So Keir Starmer also accepted that disruption to education was bad. And as a parent, he made no apology for it. Yet parents who are opposing disruption to their children's education in the independent sector are accused of, by Bridget Phillipson, of crying wolf. She says they have broad shoulders and they can absorb these rates of VAT on education. She calls them the private school lobbyists. She does not offer them the same level of understanding as Keir Starmer wanted from us when he made sure his son's education wasn't disrupted, and she does not afford them the same level of respect as she does to Ukrainian children when she tries not to disrupt their education. So it's one sector of society, the independent school sector, that she has no problem with disrupting. And let's remind ourselves that she's talking about children. So the common denominator in all of this is children. Keir Starmer was a child, his son is a child, the Ukrainian children are children, and the kids in the UK in state education and independent education are children. So we have varying degrees of how important you are to Bridget Phillipson. We have varying degrees of how important your education is to Bridget Phillipson. And the net result is, if you are in the independent sector, you are not important to Bridget Phillipson or Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer or the Children's Commissioner Rachel D'Souza. So if we get back from the moral side of this, which is indefensible, let's have a look at the facts and the figures. So we know from the ISC report that 13,000 children are no longer in independent education. Don't forget, it was supposed to be 3,000. As of right now, 13,000 less in independent education. Then we see there's been a rise in bursary funding, and bursaries have risen by 11.5%. Now, some people will turn around and go, well, hang on a minute, I thought there was no money in the independent sector, so how come they're doing that? Well, here's the rub. That's for children in the existing independent sector. So that's children whose parents can't afford the increase in their children's school fees, which have gone up by 22.6%. Again, Bridget Phillipson said she didn't think they'd go up by much more than 10%, or Rachel Reeves may have said that. 22.6%, which shows you and me and anyone who's got any kind of maths mind that you add national insurance and VAT onto education, the schools cannot absorb it. So it has to be passed on to the parents. So there are parents with children in school who do not want to disrupt their children in school, who have applied for bursaries, and the schools are honouring that where they can. However, the ISC has said that is unsustainable. So from 2025, bursaries will be cut moving forwards. Then let's have a look at partnerships with state schools. So partnerships had risen to 9,301 schools. Now that is partnering, sharing facilities, it's sharing mental health support and teachers, it's sharing actual resources, it's sharing more or less anything that can be shared between state and independent. That is unsustainable. That cannot carry on because there is no budget in the independent sector because it's all gone on kids leaving. The exodus that Bridget Phillipson said wouldn't happen is happening. And who's being punished by that? Well, it's the kids that need it the most. So the bursaries going, the partnerships going, the education for children where it suits their needs going, and then look at the state schools. So once we've looked at the independent sector and the damage it's doing to them, let's shift over to the state sector. Now, they've got no money anyway. We know that. But they have got even less money now. So school costs have risen by 3.4%, but this government gave a funding increase of 2.2%. Now, even Rachel Reeves can work out there's a gap there. They are giving less per pupil than the Tories did. So let's just let that one settle. When we're hearing about how the Tories cocked it up, the Tories were giving £450 per pupil more than Labour are doing. Significantly more. Labour is increasing their per pupil money by £100. 11,000 teachers are leaving the state school profession either by not having their contracts renewed because there is no money, or just by leaving because of the conditions, the lack of pay. 11,000. Yet we were told adding VAT on education would bring in 6,500, but it hasn't. We've lost 11,000 teachers, but we've lost 11,000 teachers. But over the next 2 years, we will gain 54,000 children from the independent sector. And we know that figure has to be true because that's the figure that the government worked off. But they didn't tell you that. They didn't want you to know that. So when Rachel Reeves was explicitly told that 54,000 children will move from the independent sector to the state sector, and she was explicitly told that the worst time she could impose VAT on education would be September 25, she went ahead and did it. She was told that the most disruptive time would be January, slightly less would be April, slightly less would be August. She went for January because she wanted the most money, and she didn't exempt SEND children because it would be administratively onerous. So if you've got a SEND child that you can no longer afford to send to the independent school that meets their needs because the state sector can't, the reason that you're paying VAT is because it would have been administratively onerous. So now you may well have to go through the administratively onerous process of applying for an EHCP, which will cost the local authority money. Well, the local authority doesn't have any money and the EHCP system is completely flatlined. And there is no SEND in state school. We know that. Bridget Phillipson told us that. So we are taking children with special educational needs out of a system that supports them because we've priced it out the market. We're putting it into a system that's falling apart, has no special educational needs provision. We're cutting funding. We're cutting teachers. You tell me whose bright idea this was. I'll tell you, it was Bridget Phillipson, Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer's, and it was driven by spite and ideology. If they want to tell you it was driven by numbers and we've just proven that the numbers don't stack up, they look even more stupid. Because what that says is they couldn't even add up the basic profit and loss. So it's pick a lane. Are you stupid? Or are you mean? Which one is it? Neither one looks very good, but I think I'd probably be going on the stupid now. I'd probably try and throw someone under the bus if I wanted to save face and say, well, they gave me the wrong figures. If you really want to do that, go for your life. I don't care what it takes. But reverse VAT on education. Because as much as you want to support the Ukrainian children, there will be no education sector to support them in. Because every single day that passes is a loss of revenue in the independent sector and a cost to the state sector. And who's footing the bill for the state sector? You, the taxpayer. So when people say to me, you talk a lot about education, you're damn right, I do. Because it will affect you whether you think it will or not. Not only financially, not only from your pocket, but also moving forwards. Because what are we creating? What are these children going on to do? If we cannot teach them, if we cannot give them the education that they need and deserve, what are we going to be left with when they graduate from school? It's not looking good any which way and how you dress this up. So yeah, I will keep talking about education until they actually start listening. And when they reverse the VAT on education policy, then maybe we'll all have a break from it. But until then, I'm afraid you're stuck with me. So you can either fast forward this video, not watch it, or just look in, put it in your inbox for another day. But there will be another one and another one and another one. There'll also be other ones, intermixed with other things as well. But as far as you're concerned, Bridget Phillipson, I am just going to be like the Duracell rabbit. I'm going to keep on going. I am relentless. I promise you. It's got to sink in at some point soon that this policy is flawed. And at the minute, your career is looking very precarious.